Ask a child to draw the sun. Every child on Earth, regardless of culture, regardless of language, regardless of what hemisphere they live in, will reach for the same color, yellow. They will draw a yellow circle with yellow rays extending outward. They will do this instinctively, without instruction, because every textbook, every cartoon, every educational poster, every emoji, every symbol system in the modern world represents the sun as yellow. The sun is yellow. It's one of the first facts a child absorbs. So fundamental, it doesn't even register as something that was taught. It feels like something that was always known. Now go outside. On a clear day, at mid-morning or mid-afternoon, when the sun is high enough that atmospheric scattering isn't reddening the light. Don't stare at it. You can't stare at it. But look at the quality of the light it produces. Look at the color of the light falling on a white surface. Look at the shadows and the highlights and the color temperature of the world as it's illuminated by the star that every textbook says is yellow. The light is white, not warm white, not cream, not pale yellow. White. The midday sun produces light that, when measured with a spectrometer, peaks in the green portion of the visible spectrum and combines across all visible wavelengths to produce what the human eye perceives as white light. The sun is a G-type main sequence star with a surface temperature of approximately 5,778 Kelvin. At that temperature, the emitted light is white. This is not alternative science. This is not a fringe interpretation. This is standard astrophysics. Every astronomer knows this. Every physics textbook that covers stellar classification states this. The sun is a white star that appears yellow under specific atmospheric conditions. And yet every children's book, every educational material, every popular depiction, every cultural representation of the sun produced in the last century shows it as yellow. The scientific fact is white. The cultural fact is yellow. And the gap between them is so wide, so pervasive, so universally maintained that most people go their entire lives without noticing the discrepancy. This raises a simple but critical question. When did the sun become yellow? The deeper I went, the more I found that the answer is specific, documentable, traceable through the history of educational publishing and scientific illustration, and it lands in a window of time that, by this point in my research, has become unsettlingly familiar. Go look at depictions of the sun from before 1900. Pull up medieval manuscript illustrations, Renaissance paintings, scientific diagrams from the 1700s and 1800s, alchemical texts, astronomical charts. The sun is depicted in a range of colors: gold, orange, red at the horizon. But the dominant representation in scientific and educational contexts is white or brilliant gold-white. The word used most frequently in pre-20th century descriptions of the sun is not yellow, it's white, brilliant, dazzling, white fire, white light. The ancients called it white. The medieval scholars called it white. The Enlightenment scientists called it white. Because when you look at it, when you observe the light it actually produces, when you step outside the cultural filter that tells you what color to expect, what you see is white. The yellow sun appears in the early 20th century. It appears in textbooks. It appears in educational materials. It appears in the simplified, color-coded diagrams that were produced for a new system of mass education that was standardizing what children learned and how they learned it across the industrialized world. The sun became yellow at the same moment that science education became institutional. The color wasn't observed, it was assigned. The silence was deafening when I started looking for the decision. The specific editorial moment when someone chose to represent the sun as yellow in educational materials, and that choice propagated across every subsequent textbook, poster, and diagram until it became the unquestioned default. Because that decision, if it was a single decision, has never been documented. There's no memo, no committee report, no published rationale explaining why the scientific fact of a white sun was replaced with the cultural fiction of a yellow one in every piece of educational material produced for the last century, as if they were following instructions they didn't fully understand. Here's what the atmospheric science says. The sun appears yellow when viewed from the Earth's surface under certain conditions because of Rayleigh scattering. The atmosphere scatters shorter wavelengths of light, blues and violets, more than longer wavelengths. This scattering removes some blue light from the direct solar beam, shifting its apparent color toward yellow. The lower the sun is in the sky, the more atmosphere the light passes through, and the more yellow, then orange, then red the sun appears. At the horizon, the sun looks orange or red. At midday, with the least atmospheric interference, the sun looks closest to its actual color, white. So the yellow sun isn't wrong in the way that saying the sky is green would be wrong. There are conditions under which the sun appears yellow. But teaching children that the sun is yellow is like teaching them that mountains are blue, because mountains appear blue from a distance through atmospheric haze. It's presenting an atmospheric artifact as an inherent property. It's teaching the distortion rather than the reality. And the deeper I went, the more I found that this particular distortion serves a purpose that has nothing to do with atmospheric science. Because here's what happens when you tell a species that their primary source of light and energy is a specific color. You calibrate their perception. You set the baseline against which all other colors are measured. If the sun is yellow, then sunlight is yellow-tinted, and white becomes something artificial, something that fluorescent bulbs produce, something that LED screens emit. White light becomes associated with technology. Natural light becomes associated with warmth, with yellow, with the golden hour glow that photographers and filmmakers and advertisers use to signal comfort and nostalgia. The deeper I went into the history of artificial lighting, the more this perceptual calibration started to look less like an accident and more like a precondition. Because the 20th century was the century of artificial light, the century when electric lighting replaced sunlight as the primary illumination source for the majority of human activity, the century when human beings moved indoors under fluorescent tubes and incandescent bulbs and eventually LED panels, and spent the majority of their waking hours in light environments that bore no resemblance to the light their bodies had evolved under, and the transition required a perceptual shift. If people understood that natural sunlight was white, then the white light of fluorescent tubes would feel natural, familiar, equivalent. But if people believed that natural sunlight was yellow, warm, golden, then artificial white light would feel cold, harsh, unnatural, and the warm-toned artificial lights, the incandescent bulbs with their yellowish glow, would feel like sunlight, like nature, like home. The yellow sun didn't just change how children draw. It changed how an entire civilization perceived the relationship between natural and artificial light. It made artificial warm light feel natural and natural white light feel artificial. It inverted the perceptual baseline. And the inversion served the interests of every industry that needed human beings to feel comfortable spending their lives indoors under artificial illumination rather than outside under the actual sun. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision, because the yellow sun is one piece of a much larger perceptual restructuring that occurred across the 20th century, a restructuring of how human beings understand their relationship to the sky, to light, to the fundamental environmental conditions that governed human biology for hundreds of thousands of years. Go look at old photographs from the late 1800s and early 1900s. Look at the sky in those photographs. Look at the quality of light. Now I know that early photographic emulsions had different spectral sensitivities than modern film or digital sensors. I know that comparing light quality across photographic technologies is methodologically complex. But look at what people wrote about the sky. Read descriptions of daylight from the 1800s and earlier. The language is remarkably consistent. Brilliant, white, dazzling, piercing. The sun described in pre-20th century literature doesn't sound yellow, it sounds white, intensely, almost painfully white. Now read modern descriptions: warm, golden, yellow, amber. The language has shifted, not because the sun changed, because the perception was recalibrated, the cultural filter was installed. And once the filter was in place, once every child learned that the sun was yellow before they were old enough to question it, the white sun became invisible, hidden in plain sight. Overhead every day, producing white light that everyone could see but nobody could perceive because the perceptual framework told them they were seeing yellow. Here's where I need you to look at something specific. Pull up the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram. It's the fundamental chart of stellar classification used in astrophysics. Every astronomy student learns it. It plots stars by temperature and luminosity. Find the sun on the diagram. It sits in the G-type classification. The color associated with G-type stars on the diagram is white to yellow-white, not yellow, white to yellow-white. The scientific community's own classification system describes the sun as white, and yet the same scientific community produces educational materials that depict it as yellow. The official explanation collapses here, because the discrepancy isn't between folk knowledge and science, it's within science itself. The research literature says white, the educational materials say yellow. The spectral data says white, the textbook illustrations say yellow. The Hertzsprung-Russell diagram says yellow-white. The children's poster on the classroom wall says yellow. The gap isn't between knowledge and ignorance. It's between what the institution knows and what the institution teaches, and that gap is maintained deliberately, year after year, textbook after textbook, without correction, without acknowledgement, without anyone in a position of educational authority saying the obvious thing. The sun is white. We've been drawing it wrong. The deeper I went, the more I found that the yellow sun is one example of a broader phenomenon. The simplification of natural reality in educational materials to a degree that crosses the line from pedagogical convenience into perceptual manipulation. The sky is depicted as a uniform blue when it's actually a complex gradient. Outer space is depicted as black when it's actually a deep field of light at every wavelength the human eye can't see. The atom is depicted as a miniature solar system when it's actually a probability cloud. Each simplification installs a perceptual framework that prevents the student from seeing reality as it actually is. And each perceptual framework serves a purpose. It makes the simplified version feel natural and the accurate version feel counterintuitive. The yellow sun makes artificial warm light feel like sunlight. The uniform blue sky makes the complexity of the atmosphere seem irrelevant. The black outer space makes the cosmos feel empty and hostile. Each simplification pushes perception in a specific direction, away from connection with the natural world, toward acceptance of the artificial environment that industrial civilization has constructed as a replacement. I'm not telling you there's a conspiracy to miscolor the sun. I'm telling you the sun is white, and every textbook says it's yellow, and nobody corrects it. I'm telling you the discrepancy has persisted for over a century without acknowledgement from the educational institutions that maintain it. I'm telling you that the perceptual effect of teaching children that the sun is yellow is measurable and significant and serves the interests of industries that need human beings to live under artificial light without feeling that something essential is missing. I'm asking why the most visible object in the human environment, the star that every human being sees every day of their life, is depicted in every educational material on Earth in a color that doesn't match what it actually looks like. I'm asking why the correction, which would require nothing more than changing a color in a diagram, has never been made. I'm asking what it means that the first scientific fact most children learn about the world they live in is wrong. I'm asking what else in the textbook is the wrong color. What else has been simplified past the point of accuracy into the territory of perceptual manipulation? What other features of the natural world have been recolored, reshaped, redescribed in ways that make the artificial version feel normal and the natural version feel strange? Go outside. Right now, if it's daytime. Look at the light, not at the sun, at the light it produces, at the color of the world under direct solar illumination. Ask yourself if what you see looks yellow. Ask yourself if it looks like the color in the textbook. Ask yourself why you were taught to see something other than what's actually there. Handed a yellow crayon and told it was the sun. What else have we been handed and never thought to question?